Happy Halloween, everyone. Let's play Castlevania. What a game. You play as vampire hunter Simon Belmont, cracking your whip all the way to the top of a creepy castle filled with a who's who of classic monsters. Roll call. We've got zombies, we've got the Gill Man, we've got the Frankenstein monster, we've got mummies, we've got Medusa, we've got bats, ghosts, knights,
spooky, scary skeletons,
dragons, Death himself, and of course, Dracula. The gang's all here. And the music? It bangs. In fact, let me shut up just for a few moments and let you listen. I found a glitch at the beginning of the game by complete accident where if you allow the demo to play too many times in a row, there's no music until the first boss. Kind of a cool glitch, even though I can't imagine why someone would want there to be no music when the music sounds like this. So yeah, I have a lot to praise this game for, but let's get the major criticism out of the way first. The controls. They're stiff. Simon moves slower than the 7-year itch, jumps like a marble statue attached to a pogo stick, and the sub-weapon is just awkward. This would be a game that would greatly benefit from a Sega Genesis controller, since it had 3 buttons. On the NES controller, the A button jumps and the B button cracks the whip, Simon's primary method of attack, and to use the various sub-weapons, you have to press B and up on the D-pad at the same time. Now, that would probably be pretty awkward regardless, but it's arguably especially so when the up button also functions to climb stairs, which this game is full of. Here I am trying to lob my battle axe at this giant bat, the boss of the first block of stages, but Simon is instead trying to climb the stairs, so I had to climb to the taller platform to make it work. That's frustrating. I must ask you a question, Mr. Bat. Further, marathon sessions with this game often result in my hands hurting quite a bit, and I think a lot of that is due to the clumsy sub-weapon controls and stiff jumping, coupled, of course, with the iconic yet far from ergonomic design of the NES controller. But I'll talk more about that specific piss-off later on. For now, I just want to stress that although the controls are a significant flaw, they're not a fatal flaw, because this game kicks all sorts of ass. Much is often made about the difficulty of Castlevania, and it is really damn hard. The stiff controls undeniably play a part in that, but what's often overlooked is how evenly the difficulty is spread, both in the game's brilliant level design and in how the bosses are handled. The game is organized into 6 blocks, which each contain 3 stages, but the stages are so short that you might as well count the 6 blocks as 6 stages. After all, bosses only come at the end of a block, and all 3 stages in each block share the same theming, so yeah, there are 6 levels in this game, basically. I'd imagine that even the very first would give trouble to a novice NES player more used to modern games, as it includes fast-running zombie enemies, no doubt refugees from the Dawn of the Dead remake, a section of pits that cause instant death if you fall in, coupled with enemies that jump out of them and fire projectiles, in a game with knockback physics, and a boss that is not a pushover. Well, maybe it is if you have the stopwatch sub-weapon. Yeah, this stopwatch makes just about everything a lot easier. But it does take up a lot of hearts. Those are the ammunition for your sub-weapon, and you get them by whipping the castle's candles, which keep the stopwatch from being too OP. Still, in the earlier parts of the game especially, you can use it as a bit of a crutch, stopping enemies in midair and whatnot. In particular, I found it useful to lean on when trying to brute force my way further than I may otherwise go when low on health. The second block is a huge upward swing in difficulty, thanks to the flying Medusa heads. Their pattern reminds me of the dragon heads from Zelda 2, but those are much easier to get in a rhythm for since Link is so much more nimble than Simon. This part in particular hung me up a number of times. I could only clear it consistently if I had the stopwatch, although I did get lucky once when the knockback physics actually threw me a bone inadvertently. The boss at the end is a giant Medusa head, and she's the final one you'll be able to cheese with a stopwatch, because after her, bosses are immune to it. Even if you don't have the stopwatch, she's still really easy with the Sacred Cross, which is hilariously referred to in the manual as the boomerang thanks to Nintendo's religious censorship policies. In fairness though, this weapon does boomerang back to you, dealing damage to enemies and clearing out projectiles both ways. We'll talk more about it later. The third and fourth block are each only modest steps up in difficulty. Block 3 introduces the hunchback enemies, which jump all around like monkeys. If you don't whip them quickly, they can become real pests, and don't even think about trying to outrun the bastards, since Simon moves like he's treading through waist-deep mud in Nam. The same area that introduces the hunchbacks also introduces these crack-fiend skeletons that dance all over the place hurling bones. I like to imagine they're stripping their own rib cages. The boss has a couple of mummies, which you should be well prepared for at this stage in the game. Block 4 includes a lot of moving platforms and pits, again complete with leaping enemies. It's a natural progression from the brief introduction to this sort of thing in Block 1. Near the end, you'll have to master the previously discussed strategy regarding the hunchbacks if you haven't done so already. Or cheese it with the stopwatch. But this part of the game reminds me of a minor thing that I wish wasn't included: whip upgrades. Yeah, you start out with just a short little leather whip and have to upgrade it to a chain and then upgrade it again to a longer chain, which is what you'll have for the vast majority of your adventure, since these whip upgrades come almost immediately on any candle you crack open. Because upgrading is so easy, it makes it feel pointless, so why not just start Simon off with the good whip? Yet, certain checkpoints in the game basically force you to deal with a number of enemies with no upgrades, such as this one, where hunchbacks are being dropped on Simon like an air raid and there are no candles at all. Thankfully, when I respawned here with only the leather whip, I had the strategy for the hunchbacks down pat already, and made short work of them with only the leather whip. You could say this upgrade system adds to the challenge to a game where there isn't a massive amount of punishment for dying. More on that in just a little bit. But I personally just think it's kinda irritating and doesn't add much of substance. Anyway, the block ends with the Frankenstein monster and hunchback combo boss, which is easily a tougher battle than any of the previous bosses. And yes, this is one of those games where even if you defeat a boss, you still have to avoid that last projectile or else your victory doesn't count. It's fitting that a game so strict and unforgiving in its platforming mechanics and combat would be similarly strict here. Going from Block 4 to Block 5 is the second huge difficulty increase, but these couple of drastic steps up in the game don't detract from my point that the difficulty is remarkably even, especially for the NES, where games would often drastically spike up and down, rather than starting out at their easiest point and progressively getting harder. You know, like a game should, like Castlevania does. Even this stage, hard as it may be, is very learnable. I've stated how unforgiving the game is in its platforming and combat mechanics, but it's not unforgiving at all in terms of extra lives and continues. You'll never get sent back further than the beginning of the block. And if you have extra lives, which you can earn more of by scoring points, killing enemies, and getting money bags from the candles, and by finding some hidden points and one-ups. This makes the difficulty more manageable even for those who aren't the best at these types of games, and blazing through a tough stage like an awesome badass after memorizing it well enough can be very rewarding. The lion's share of Block 5 is very learnable. Once I got it down pat, it wasn't hard at all. The lion's share does not include the final corridor before the boss, however, which includes not one but two of these knights introduced earlier in the block, placed one after the other. These guys require 8 cracks of the whip to kill, and they never tow up to you because they're always backing away while chucking axes at 2 different altitudes. Funnily enough, there are parts where you can actually chase them off screen. Anyway, 2 of these guys, one directly after the other, would be one thing. But it's another thing entirely that once you get to that corridor, you not only have to deal with the knights, but also a constant onslaught of Medusa heads. It's hellish, and fighting through them with only the whip would be a fool's errand unless you're just really good. To get through it as someone with average skill level, you must learn to keep yourself centered in the screen to avoid the Medusas, while spamming the cross to both chip away at the knight, as well as take out the axes it's flinging at you. This method is a lot easier if you have the double shot or triple shot power-up. Yeah, these enable you to throw out 2 or 3 sub-weapons when you're normally limited to only one on the screen at a time, and you can get them out of candles as a reward if you've landed enough hits in recent gameplay, or find them hidden in the walls. Hidden in the walls is also where the health in this game is found, in the form of a pork chop. Seriously, that's what the manual calls it, a pork chop. It looks like a classic cartoon roasted turkey to me. These are pretty rare, and anytime I fire this game up, there are always multiple times where I'm whipping in vain at walls that I know don't have them, because I'm that desperate to fill up my life bar. But whether you're searching for pork chops or for double or triple shots, you need to be careful that you're whipping a wall that you can actually access quickly, because if not, these disappear quickly, just like any other item or power-up you may discover as an enemy drop or a candle drop. Anyway, if you find a double shot power-up before you find a sub-weapon, it unfortunately doesn't count, and that sucks. Especially when you've just recently died, have a checkpoint just before this particular corridor, and have lost both your sub-weapon and all of your hearts that power them. In this and other parts of the game, farming may be necessary if you lose a life and end up at a checkpoint rather than game overing and ending up back at the beginning of the block. Speaking of which, at the beginning of Block 5 is the Holy Water, a sub-weapon we haven't touched on yet, hilariously referred to in the manual as the Firebomb, again due to Nintendo's religious censorship policies. This is a weapon that's kind of situational, but if you learn how to use it correctly, it's powerful as all hell, or should I say heaven. If you're elevated above an enemy, it'll be your best friend. Now, this place at the beginning is the only part of Block 5 where the Holy Water is available, meaning that in order to use it at the end, you must collect it here and not die on your way there. This is a great example of difficulty balancing, since what it means is, you get rewarded with an easier ending if you manage to trek through the whole gauntlet on one life, but if you lose your life along the way, you have to make up for that at the end. Anyway, blowing through the corridor with Holy Water is a breeze. Since the knights are always backpedaling, you do have to master how to jump and fling it so they can't avoid it, but if it lands, you'll take them out in one hit, and after the knights and Medusas, all you have to worry about is Death himself. That's right, the boss is the Grim Reaper, and he's one of the most infamous bosses in all of 8-bit gaming. If you have the Holy Water and triple shot, you can cheese him by locking him into one place before he starts flying all around and tossing sickles. However, I didn't manage to pull off the cheese on this playthrough. I made it all the way with the Holy Water twice and failed both times. Watching my footage back, I'm pretty sure that I just didn't start pouring out the Holy Water early enough to lock him down. Anyway, that was the method I used to defeat the Reaper the first time I beat the game, which was a few years back. This time, I actually managed to take him out only with the cross, which is thankfully placed right before the corridor from hell in case you lose the Holy Water. Beating the Reaper without cheesing him was really rewarding. The cross is the way to go if you want a reasonable challenge. Something that's not as trivial as just locking him in one spot with the Holy Water, but not as hard as using the other, less effective sub-weapons. Or just using the whip, if you're a total psycho. Yeah, I actually tried that a couple of times when I was trying to take the easy way out of the corridor by using the stopwatch. The stopwatch will get you through the corridor alright, but once you reach the Reaper, you're fatally screwed, because it doesn't work on him and your whip isn't nearly fast enough to deal with the onslaught of sickles. Unless, of course, you're a Castlevania god. The only sub-weapon we haven't talked about yet is the dagger, and there's a good reason for that, because unlike the Holy Water, cross, stopwatch, and axe, the dagger fucking blows, and could more accurately be called the butter knife. It does minimal damage, has terrible range, is wiped out by projectiles, and is often placed after good weapons as the game designer's idea of a sick joke. Yeah, anytime you pick up a weapon, it discards the one you previously had. So maybe items disappearing quickly is actually a good thing because it does at least help with avoiding this piece of junk. Nonetheless, you're bound to accidentally get it at some point even if you do your best to avoid it. And when you do, that's when the game just fucking laughs. Because it's actually so poor that it's arguably worse than no sub-weapon at all. No joke, with no sub-weapon at all, you at least won't waste valuable seconds in the heat of the game screwing around, won't waste precious hearts that could be being stockpiled for a weapon that doesn't suck, and won't waste mental bandwidth that could instead be used on pattern recognition, reaction time, and using your whip to the best of its ability. Ignore the butter knife. It's a waste. Anyway, the Holy Water, Cross, Stopwatch, and Axe all have their strengths and weaknesses, and all have specific areas of the game and specific bosses where you can get the most out of them. And a lot of it also is about personal preference. It's fun to figure out your own unique playstyle in Castlevania, and figure out what works better or worse in what stages. It even adds a little replay value. Now let's talk about Block 6. This is my other big complaint about the game, aside from the stiff controls. I hate this block. Yes, that's right, all of it. It's not exactly a spike in difficulty. This block is just something else entirely that sticks out from the rest of the game like a sore thumb. First of all, it's incredibly short, and I mean incredibly short. The first stage is literally just a straight freaking line. The second is a 6-screen grid, and the third is just the final boss and nothing else. For a game that had excellent level design all the way through, they got really lazy here, and had to compensate for it by adding in a U-Haul load worth of bullshit. Because secondly, the level design and enemy behavior highlight everything that's annoying and poorly designed about the controls and physics in a mostly great game. Anyway, the straight line is full of the giant bats from the first block. I actually like the idea behind this. Using the first boss as a regular enemy in the home stretch of the game is a great way to up the ante and make the player feel like they've come a long way and have what will no doubt be their toughest battle yet right in front of them. But holy shit is getting past them ever frustrating, and completely chance-based. Trying to fight these fuckheads was a losing battle for me. I don't know how anyone else may have done at it if they tried, but I could never get positioned in the correct way to land many blows, which they take a ridiculous amount of before they finally drop. There are simply too many of them, and there are so many bottomless pits that you effectively have one hit point throughout this whole stretch. The knockback physics can be frustrating at any point in the game, but here, you'll learn quickly, if you haven't already, that they sometimes seem to draw you in the direction of the closest pit, rather than to where the momentum should logically be throwing you. Instead of fighting the bats, I ended up just blazing right past them. Yeah, seriously, just go and don't stop and you have probably a 50-50 shot of making it to the end, sometimes completely unscathed, with even better odds if you grab the stopwatch along the way, which you damn well should not only for this part but for the next. I can't stress enough how impossible this bridge feels at first, but then once you figure out the strategy of just winging it, you realize that beating it is mostly a parlor trick, albeit one that is totally unpredictable and involves a healthy dose of pure luck. For what comes after, you just need to memorize exactly where you need to go, which isn't hard because it's not like there are a lot of twists and turns, and use the stopwatch. Otherwise, good luck getting past all these damn birds and hunchbacks. I already mentioned how the stairs interfere with the use of the sub-weapon, since trying to use a sub-weapon near a staircase results in Simon going up the stairs instead of using the weapon thanks to the way the controls are mapped. But in this segment, you really feel how ruthless of an enemy the staircases themselves are, because you're totally defenseless when you're on them, unable to use your whip or anything. Then, there's Dracula. It's here that the game really does cut you a break, because it's here that extra lives no longer matter. Yes, this screen right here is your new starting point after every death, even if you game over. Thank goodness. Popular opinion seems to be that the Reaper is actually tougher than Dracula. I'm not sure I agree with that. On this playthrough specifically, I had way more trouble with the count. Drac has two forms, each with its own life bar, and you have to beat them both back to back. For Dracula's first form, I actually beat it in one of my very first tries, but as I played more and more due to my continued failure to string everything together in one run, I actually saw myself getting worse at this boss fight instead of better. Why? Well, I think the repetition was melting my brain, first of all. Having an unlimited amount of cracks at Dracula in a row instead of being sent back to the beginning of the block may have actually done me a disservice. I'm pretty sure there's a pattern to him, or maybe he reacts based on the movements and actions of Simon, but in my stressed out state, the longer I went, the worse I got at recognizing any of that, and the more random it seemed to me whether Dracula shot fireballs forward or whether he shot them upward. So I took a lot of hits, and he only needs to hit Simon like 4 times to put him down, either by torching him with fireballs or teleporting on top of him. More on that bullshit later. Meanwhile, Dracula's first form takes 16 hits to kill. That is way too many, and his face is his only weak point, and because none of the sub-weapons work, you're stuck with the slow-ass whip, and the window you have to hit him before he begins his teleport cycle is tiny. A slight miscalculation can result in being hit with fireballs, and a slight slip of the thumb can turn Simon in the wrong direction. So even if you don't take a hit, you miss the window and extend the fight, giving him more chances to teleport on top of you. These slips of the thumb increased as my failed attempts stacked up, and my hands continued to get more sweaty and sore. Another thing I often found myself accidentally doing in this state was leaping into Dracula instead of leaping upward. Yeah, I mentioned that the jumping is clunky, and this cursed boss battle really shines a spotlight on it. It's not like in Super Mario or most other platformers where how long you hold the button down or how much speed you build up when you're running alters the jump. Instead, a jump up is always the same and a jump forward is always the same. And you can't alter the trajectory in any way once you've already hit the button. So look before you leap, because once you leap, you are locked in. The teleporting also pisses me off. It's a peeve of mine for video game bosses in general. I despise it. One game changer for me was realizing at some point, though, to never try to run through Dracula. That's probably the only aspect of the fight I actually improved in. What I mean is, if Simon and Drac are facing each other, you always want to turn around instead of keep going forward, because trying to get all the way through him will result in taking a hit way more often than not. Finally, I think the monotonous music this stage uses also played a part in melting my brain. The lone black mark on an otherwise legendary soundtrack. The handful of times I beat the first form early on in facing him, I was unprepared for the second, and ended up losing due to running out of hearts. I eventually settled into the strategy of farming a bunch of them before the fight, because even though they're of no use against the first form of Dracula, I knew that they'd be vital to surviving the second form after already having been worn down by the first. Had I only started doing this sooner, beating him would have probably been a lot quicker, because I didn't really start farming until after I had started playing more poorly, and let me tell you, farming a bunch of hearts and then getting out of the gate immediately with a poor showing against the first form of Drac is so demoralizing. It was the biggest thing that made me want to quit. But I'm not a fucking quitter, and I had beaten this game once before, and god damn it, I was gonna do it again. Hilariously, it's also possible to walk off the edge of this platform and die during the farm if you don't hit the down button soon enough. Another key element to this strategy is hitting Drac with a vial of holy water when he first comes in. It won't damage him, but it will nonetheless count as several hits, and enable you to grab a double shot from a candle, which is vital if you want to cheese the second and final form of Dracula. Otherwise, he's one tough son of a bitch. Every last thing about this boss fight felt like a chore, but I'll be damned if it didn't feel good to watch that castle crumble to the ground, flip the TV the bird, and tell it, fuck you. Like many games on the NES, there's a second loop that makes the game more difficult, just in case it wasn't already difficult enough for you. Despite the stiff controls, and despite at times feeling like a chore, in a way that high difficulty games don't necessarily have to, Castlevania is mostly a total blast. It's not only a monumentally important game, but also one that I happen to personally love to death, warts and all. The soundtrack is one of the best ever, and while the enemies can be annoying at times, they're nonetheless endearing and iconic. Right from the opening cinematic, which might be very minimalistic, it excels at setting the mood. The atmosphere is off the charts. Even the brief little map scenes you get upon progressing to the next block of stages help give the game a sense of scale, despite how small and short it is in actuality. If you give it a go, and you should, and find yourself overwhelmed with its difficulty, I won't judge you for that, but will implore you to look up a map and figure out where all the pork chops and other hidden stuff is before you quit. That'll make it at least a little easier for you, and it'll get a lot easier with some level memorization. This is a game that is worth the effort. And with that, I thank you kindly for watching, and humbly request a thumbs up, a comment, a subscription, and ring of the bell, or some combination of the three, if you think I've earned it. This has been a Leaky Faucet review. Happy Halloween, keep it spooky, and have a great Fright Night. See you next time.